Wrestling fans, this episode is brought to you by MANSCAPED. MANSCAPED is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. And gentlemen, if you have hair, this tool is for you. If you're like my friend Tom, who's hairless, he's like a seal, you don't need this product. But if you're like most of us and want to keep the family jewels up to snuff this summer, check out Manscaped. We've partnered with Manscaped and are now offering a 20% discount to podcast listeners. Use the promo code WCML at checkout at manscaped.com.
I started judo in 2001. Freeless Sensei was murdered in 2004. And then I had my first leg amputated in 2014.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Ryan Warner. Today we have a special guest, John Kuchinski. You've never heard his name in the national wrestling circuits, but this guy is a winner on multiple fronts, folks. He's blind, he has no feet, legs, or knees, and he's an active judo practitioner and former wrestler. Hope you enjoy this episode. A lot of inspiration hearing from our friend John Kuchinski. Fan of the week goes to my man Saul Polito. That's at wrestlers_poppy on the Instagram. The father to the great Blades sisters, Kennedy and Karina Blades. Just found out that Saul is a listener of the show, and we got to give a special thank you. Thank you, Saul Polito. We appreciate it. As always, folks, this episode's brought to you by Spartan Combat. Spartan Combat's premier athlete, Kyle Dake, will be wrestling at the Olympics in just a few weeks. You can shop Kyle Dake Team USA merch right now at SpartanCombat.com. And that's it, folks. Let's give it up for the great John Kuchinski. All right, sir. Thank you for doing this, John. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
It is an honor, my friend. I was reading through your bio a couple of times today, and it's crazy to read. So let's just take it from the top.
Sure.
Tell us about kind of your story and how things got going for you.
Well, so I'm from a small town in northern Michigan called Rogers City, and that's where I was born and raised. And I guess like the first crazy event in my life that happened was at the age of 12. They found out I had a brain tumor, and the good news is that it wasn't cancerous, and it was also operable. The bad news is that after they operated, I was blind. The tumor had created pressure within my cranium, and the pressure was focused on my optic nerve, and the blood flow was restricted to it. And so basically my optic nerve died. So my eyes are healthy, but the optic nerve that, connects it to my brain and all is essentially dead.
So is that something they thought could happen coming out of the surgery?
They didn't really expect it at all. They thought they had caught it early enough and that everything would just, once the pressure was relieved, everything would kind of, just be right back to normal. But that ended up not being the case. And so I kind of woke up blind, kind of with no warning.
What was that experience like?
It was pretty intense. I was in denial for a while. I didn't really think I was blind because, I was on all types of, anesthesia at first, and then, pain meds and everything else. And when you're that young, and I mean, even when you're an adult, but especially when you're that young, those drugs have a pretty profound effect on you. So then once I came out of that, I was just, I thought it was a temporary thing. I thought that I'd be blind for a while, but it definitely come back. But then as time went on, I just realized, this wasn't coming back and this was my new way of life. And so I had a choice, was either get used to it and make the best of it, or you could sit around and feel, sorry for yourself, which I chose the former rather than the latter.
How'd you come to that at such a young age?
Basically, I had a really strong support system with my family and friends. And it started out just with the fact that nobody really treated me any different. No one treated me like the poor blind kid, for lack of a better way of saying it. My friends expected me to keep up and just do the same things we were doing. And, my family never, never cut me short on what I was able to do. And so just having that kind of support really gives you the, the belief that you can, overcome this type of adversity and have, an independent and meaningful life.
Yeah, the support system, and like you said, everyone treating you the same had to be a nice relief, coming out of it, because obviously you were in such a different place mentally. You're coming out of that. What was the just curiosity? What was the biggest thing to get used to, in terms of like being able to go to school and then participate in athletics and things like that?
I mean, just everything. It was, starting over, I had to learn to read Braille. I had to learn to, travel independently as a blind person with, a cane, daily living skills, as far as, being able to, make my own meals. And, you're 12, so you're not really, but, to get back on pace, right? And eventually to catch up with, from there, I had 5 years to catch up to get myself ready so that I could, move out and go to college and be independent. And so, basically just the day-to-day stuff, was, the most difficult as far as, initially just, how to, take care of yourself, how to shower, how to, just be organized as someone who can't see, and just, how to, really just exist and just, just be independent that way.
And once you had adapted to that new life, where did you end up going to school at?
I went to Michigan State University, and I studied mathematics.
And how did you find judo from there? Was it at Michigan State? Because I guess I should have asked first. Did you wrestle, or is it just judo that you're engaged
I
with?
did wrestle. Yep, I definitely wrestled.
Tell me about that.
It was awesome. I started wrestling. I wanted to wrestle right out of, I had brain surgery in December, and I got out of the hospital in January. And then the junior high wrestling season started in March, and I wanted to wrestle then. And they were like, no, you had too much head trauma, so you got to wait a year. So I waited a year, and then in 8th grade I wrestled, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. Where I'm from, we're a big wrestling town, so all my friends wrestled, and it was as much a social thing as it was. Practice was fun because everybody was there. And we worked hard, and of course we had guys in high school that we looked up to who placed in state, and we're doing really well. And so it was awesome. And then in high school, being part of that team, we went to the team state tournament twice, and that was a lot of fun. And it was just an amazing experience. And like I said, you learn a lot of, I'm sure, as the mindset you learned in wrestling, that sticks with you. You're not afraid to work hard. You're not afraid to grind it out. Wrestling kind of teaches you to be aware of the fact that not everything is going to be easy, and that working for it feels good.
And it had to give you a leg up going into judo, because that's where you met a gentleman by the name of Jeff Friedless, and that was a real life impacting event for you.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And I started judo basically because of the fact that like I wanted to do something that was like wrestling. And you know, Michigan State's a Big Ten school, and I wasn't on par with those guys. And so I wanted to find something that was like that, you know, that wasn't, lifting weights or going to the gym, or, you know, something that was just more structured and more kind of a more like, I don't know how I want to say it, like like more of a group activity, I guess is what I was looking for. Because you know, with the gym you can say, I'm gonna lift weights at 6 o'clock, and 6 o'clock rolls around, you're gonna do it at 8, and then you end up not doing it. The nice thing about wrestling, judo, is that you need a partner to do it, so you have to go when that activity is. And you need a mat, and most of us don't have, well, I mean, a lot of people do have wrestling rooms now, but I certainly didn't. And so it was a lot of fun that way. And then I really liked the people that I was training with, and I did meet, that is where I met Jeff Friedless, who was a big impact on me. He was one of the senior students in class in judo when I first met him, and then he later ended up taking over the school, and I studied with him for about 3 years before he was unfortunately murdered.
How did that all come about?
Well, there was a young lady in class, and her boyfriend got it in her head that, there was, something romantic going on between her and Jeff Friedless, who is now Friedless Sensei, one of the head instructor of judo. And he came to the dojo one day and shot Friedless Sensei twice, and then shot himself once.
Whoa.
I know. When I say it out loud, it doesn't even, it still doesn't even sound real. It's just too crazy of a story. And I mean, this was in our dojo that was across the street from MSU. There's not murders in East Lansing. East Lansing's a college town. I mean, you can walk up and down the street any time of day. It doesn't matter at all. I mean, it's completely safe all the time. It's absolutely nothing to worry about. And then something as wild as that happens. And then not only that, something that wild happens, but then, you're personally connected to that. That was a dear friend of mine at that point.
And you had said you weren't even there that day, randomly, of all days.
Yeah, I didn't go that day. I was actually in the process of moving rooms in my fraternity house, and I had somebody to help me that day. And so I was moving rooms, and so I just missed class. And then later that day, we were actually driving down the street, and my friend told me, he's like, kind of down the way from our dojo was a bank. And my buddy's like, man, we got to turn off here because it's all tape. There's crime scene tape by the bank. I wonder if somebody tried to rob it or something. You know what I mean? And found out the next day that there was a shooting at the dojo, and Friedless Sensei was murdered. And, probably one of the most profound experiences of my life. One of the main reasons that, I continued practicing judo for, 15 or 16 consecutive years after that, right up until, COVID-19, which it, has kind of interrupted everybody's training.
Right.
But yeah, he was an amazing guy.
Why did he impact you so much? What about him?
I guess just because, as much as he beat us up on the mat, off the mat, he was, that nice to us. And you knew that he cared about you, and he cared about your development as a person, and that he was going to push you. And that was going to be the way that he was going to help you develop as a person, help you realize who you were. And he definitely did push us on the mat, and was just an overall good person off the mat. Like I remember, for example, one time I hadn't been to judo in a class or two, and I showed up and he said, "Where you been?" And I was like, "Man, there's a lot of snow and it takes me longer to travel, and with class and everything." And he's like, "Just let me know, I'll come pick you up." And it was just really cool. You know what I mean? It's not his responsibility to come get me, but he offered to, and just small things like that. He was just a really, really solid person. And I also really admired his technical ability as a judo practitioner, and wanted to be like that.
And so how long after did you continue practicing judo before you had your first leg operation?
I had from the beginning, I started judo in 2001. Frida Sensei was murdered in 2004. And then I had my first leg amputated in 2014.
And then just explain to listeners, like, what happened there? Like, how did that transpire?
So, starting in about 2008, I started having a lot of problems with my left foot and calf. It would get like excessively tired very quickly when I trained, and then but it would come back right away. Like, it was just strange. I thought somehow like I was biasing that side or something with my stance, or somehow with the activity I was using my left more than my right. And I could just kind of write it off. But it progressively got worse to the point that, like, instead of it just being tired after that short amount of time, it would look white and gray and almost like frostbitten. So we knew I had some type of circulation problem. And so I saw doctors for a while, and nobody gave me really a concrete answer. And then I went to a different hospital, and they were like, "You need a femoral to tibia bypass," which basically is they cut out a large section of your, or I mean, not necessarily a large section, but in my case, femoral to tibia is a large section. That's from the top, all the way from like your groin area to your ankle area. They took out a section of artery and they replaced it with a vein from my same leg. They just put it in backwards, which I had no clue that it worked that way, but it does.
Wow.
I know, right?
That's insane.
And so they did that, and then that held up for about a year, and then they did like some patchwork to it and to the bypass, and that held up for a little while. But the problem is I have a genetic disease. It's not hereditary, but it is genetic. My arteries are diseased. I have something called Berger's disease, and my arteries harden and occlude prematurely. So my arteries in the peripheral part of my legs, like down by my calves, kind of south of my knee, look like what you would imagine to see in somebody who is elderly or on the obese side. And so the bypass ended up not holding up, and it got to the point like when they do the bypass, you have to have a good top to connect the vein to that's now an artery, and a good bottom to connect the vein to that's now an artery. And I ran out of good bottoms to connect it to. And so at that point, not having good blood flow to my foot, I developed wounds that basically just didn't heal. And then those wounds, turned into, there was necrotic tissue, and then that necrotic tissue became infected, which then you have gangrene. And which was very painful. They had all kinds of medicines and everything like that. And my quality of life was just really poor. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't eating well. I could barely make it to train. And when I did, it wasn't, it wasn't the type of workout that you'd like to have. You were, limiting yourself. And plus, you shouldn't really be training on pain meds. So you're not taking as much as you should. So you're in pain. And so then I made the decision that to have my leg amputated. in 2014.
Was that something you came up with or the doctors had recommended?
Well, it was an inevitability because eventually everything south of my knee would have died because of lack of blood flow. And the longer I waited, the more significant of an amputation I would have had to have. And so they did the below the knee first, thinking that everything's, north of the knee wasn't diseased enough that it had to be removed, which ended up not being the case in the end. But no, it was definitely the doctor's recommendation. And I was opposed to it at first, of course. Because nobody, I mean, I don't think it's I don't think it's a real like settling thought to most people that, you're going to go to the hospital and leave with less than what you came with.
Man.
Yeah. And so I was opposed to it for a long time, but the pain became so much that, it was when I finally did have it amputated, it was a blessing.
A blessing.
Oh my gosh, I was in so much pain, and instantly when I woke up from surgery, my entire mood was just 1,000 times improved. I felt like, so much better. I mean, I barely even needed any pain meds after having my leg cut off because that pain was nothing compared to what I was dealing with before having it cut off.
Trace it at something that's dying. Is that inducive, or is that inflicting of pain? You would think it'd be the opposite, like you wouldn't feel it anymore.
A lot of people have said that to me, and you don't have feeling in it, in that hot and cold don't register the same, or even pressure doesn't register the same. But at a point, pressure touching it, right, doesn't register the same. However, if you put a good amount of pressure on that, or there still is a pain sensor in there to warn you back off, because you still could make this worse. Because not being able to feel it like that, you could easily create a larger open wound, or anything like that. It's almost like the way when you hear about people with leprosy and how they can't feel their fingertips and stuff like that, and then they end up smashing up their fingertips, and a lot of them don't have fingers because of that, because they can't feel in the end, in their digits like that.
It's crazy how it's just obviously a reminder that it's a warning system. Hey, back up. There's something going on there. And so you weren't feeling those same kind of pains when you woke up from the surgery. And then, how did you start to adapt to life with one leg and were you using a prosthetic, and how did that go?
Well, at first, you can't, because you have to wait for your stump. That's actually what they call it. I know that sounds kind of crude, but you have to wait for your stump to heal up, and you have to get your you have to get your staples out, or sutures, or a combination of. And then after that, you have to wait for that incision to heal up strong enough, because you're going to bear weight pretty much right where that was, especially for a below the knee amputation. So it was probably between 6 and 9 months before I was on a prosthetic. So it was slow going at first, moving around my house in a walker, and it just felt like everything was just took so much time, and it took so much work. But eventually, got to the point that I could get a prosthetic, and that made life a lot easier. And, I just took kind of my training attitude to physical therapy, and I just, went at it with some enthusiasm, and, I showed up to train, and, 6-9 months after having my leg cut off, started working with the prosthetic 3 months from, 3 months from there, I was walking on the prosthetic without crutches. And feeling good about it, moving around well.
It's incredible that you're able to summon this inner fortitude of enthusiasm, again and again. I mean, where does that come from for you?
I mean, for me, a big part of it is, a huge part of it was the dojo. I wanted to get back there. I really liked the people I trained with, and I really wanted to keep training with them and keep learning with them and keep pace. And so I always wanted to get back. I always had something to get back to. I always had a goal, other than getting healthy. I was getting healthy for something. So I could think about it like training. So I was training for something. And then, I'm a mathematician. So by transitivity, if I want to do judo, I got to be able to move around on my prosthetic leg. So really training for my prosthetic leg is training for judo. And I want to get back to judo desperately. And so you just take that mindset into your physical therapy, and, what you put in, you get out. And so the harder you work, the more it comes.
And then as you make it through this, the same thing happens on your other leg. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other leg, they didn't even go through the bypass situation because they just, it didn't hold up on the left leg. So they were like, it's probably not going to hold up on the right leg. So we don't want to put you through the trauma. And so they amputated my right leg below the knee outright. And that again was pretty rough. I was not looking forward to that. I was really opposed to that because I was like, I got it figured out on one leg now with the prosthetic. And I'm doing good. And I think I can, I'm starting to think that I can, have an independent, meaningful life and, get back to doing the things I want to do. And then right away, it's time to go through it again. And it's the whole, another set of circumstances to, work with. But at the same time, you don't have a choice. You can either adapt or you can not get back to the things you want to do, because walking and being independent comes before doing wrestling or judo.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm going to be alive for a really long time. And I don't want to just sit around thinking about the days when I used to wrestle or do judo. I want to get back to doing that. And those are really the only two choices you have. Get back to doing the things you like doing or don't.
And to have that passion hanging out there as a carrot seems like one of the key motivators for you. And you just think about all the people who are out there in the world who don't have something they're passionate about or they care about. Obviously, that's been super important to you. Kind of as we wind this down, and I know you've had operations since then, but as we kind of wind this down, what's the if you were to speak to a school or something, it's just like the biggest takeaway for you on how you've been able to navigate this? Does it come down to attitude, and then
for me, excuse me. I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No, go ahead, man.
I mean, for me, it really comes down to two things kind of is, the intensity of my approach. The intensity of my approach. So I'm always checking that. Am I giving it my best? And, the other thing you got to watch is, are you being safe? Are you getting ahead of yourself? Because you want to give it your best because that's how you're going to make the best progress. But if you start going too hard, you're going to get a setback. So you really got to watch the intensity of your approach. You need to go hard, but not too hard. And the other thing is, living your life with, making sure that you're still living your life according to the values that you think are important. and doing the things that you think are important. And what I mean by that is, you go into physical therapy, well, you can take your wrestling mindset, your judo mindset into physical therapy. And, remembering who you are, even when you have these, situations where, you might need to redefine yourself, or, you might need to come to grips with, who you are now. Well, I mean, through it all, I've been a wrestler, I've been a judoka, and, keeping that in mind has really helped me along. If that makes sense.
No, it does. And it's just incredibly inspiring to me and to a lot of people. And I know you're a source of motivation for a lot of people out there. And hopefully through this podcast, we can continue to spread that. And you're always welcome to come back on, man, because I know we're only scratching the surface. And I'd love to sit back and talk judo with you sometime as well.
I would definitely love to come back on. This was a great experience, and I really appreciate you having me.
No, it's an honor, man. Thanks again. You have a great day. That's it for this episode, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. This episode was brought to you by MANSCAPED. Get 20% off on your next purchase with the promo code WCML at manscaped.com.